Did I notice out? Okay, everything seems to be working. All right. Spotlight. Spotlight. Okay, gang. See. Next step. Grab the guitar. Okay, let's see what I'm going to chant. Hold on a second. Let's figure this out real quickly. Oh, that's easy. We'll chant Sri Radhika Stava, because Radharani's appearance day is next Monday. Isn't that wonderful? So next Monday we are celebrating Radharani's appearance day. And we'll be here, excuse me, in Nugaloka for Radharani's appearance day in the afternoon. Tomorrow I'll be traveling. We're gonna have, but I should be able to do this class tomorrow too. All right. Corona parte, sanna Manita Charite Koram Kurumai Konaparite Sanaka Sanatana Manita Charite Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jaya Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jaya Gokula Taru Dalamahite Gokula Tarune Mandala Mahite Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jaya Radhe Jaya Jaya Madhava Jaya Haribo, 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 Chaigo, Haribo, 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 Chaigo, Haribo, 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 Jaya Jaya, Prabhupada. Prabhupada Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Acharya all Satetas Shimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidvaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopikapada Saim Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuradam Ki Jai Jagadavasami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarne. So Om Ganata Miranda Shah Gananjana Shilakaya Chakshur Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So tomorrow I will be traveling, but we will have the class at the regular time, number one. Number two, most likely there'll be another class an hour later, or maybe it'll be continuous or whatever, because we have a program at the Temple for Young People. I think I'm going to be broadcasting that. So we have our regular class at the regular time, and then roughly an hour after that begins, then we'll start another class, which will be interacting with some young people who are just coming to Krishna consciousness, which might be interesting for everybody to see. So that'll be a double header tomorrow evening, if Krishna desires. So, because I'm flying to Orlando tomorrow. Now, I'm not going to Orlando to see Disney World. I am not at all interested in that. I want to see Krishna World. I want to see Krishna, not some mouse. Because if you're concentrated on a mouse, that's what you'll become in your next life. Yam yam bapi smaran bhavam twajate ante kalevaram tom tom evaiti kontya siddharthat bhava bhavata. Whatever you're thinking of throughout your life, or especially at the time of death, that's where you go, buddy. Wherever you put your heart, that's where you go. So beware, because if you're like Bart Maharaj, who is thinking of his pet deer at the time of death, that's going to be your next life. A pet deer, or a pet dog, or a pet cat, or a pet, what else? Rat. Whatever types of pets you have. Okay. So, with that happy thought in mind, let's go to the Caitanya Caritamrta. We're still in the 12th chapter about cleansing the Gundicha temple. And we're reading about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu interacting with all of his wonderful devotees. Okay. Here we go. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hold on a second. I have to find the open window. I have so many open windows. Oh my God, that I have to find the one with the I think I need to close. Oh, here we go. Here it is. Folio views. So again, Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Okay. So we are on text 195 in this chapter, and I think we're going to be finishing it pretty soon. Let me just open this up a little bit more. Okay. So let us go. Hey na tomara sangi mora, hey katre bojana, na jani tomara sangi kache, hayam bana. Nityananda Prabhu continued. Okay. So let me tell you where we are right now in this particular chapter. Lord Nityananda and Advaita Acharya having their normal sarcastic arguments with each other. But actually, they are revealing higher truths with their sarcastic arguments, which are actually loving arguments with each other. Let me just do one thing here, just so I can see something. Keep tabs on everything while we're talking here. Okay. So Nityananda Prabhu continued, you are such a monist. He's talking to Advaita Acharya. And now I am eating beside you. I do not know how my mind will be affected in this way. And Prabhupada says something very interesting here, quoting a verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Sangat san jayate kama. Bhagavad Gita 2:62. One develops his consciousness according to society and association. Of course, the Bhagavad Gita says, karanam gunasangasha, that according to the modes that one's associating with. And this verse in the second chapter is part of this Jayato Vishak Pumsam chapter text. By contemplating sense objects, one becomes attached to them, and then by that sangat sanjayate kama, then less comes. One develops his consciousness according to society and association. As Srila Nityananda Prabhu admits, a devotee should be very careful when associating with those who are not devotees. When asked about a house by a household devotee what the behavior of a devotee should be, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately replied, Asatsanga tyag e Vaishnavachara, Sri Sangi, Eka sadhu Krishna bhaktara. A Vaishnava devotee should simply discard intimate association with non-devotees. In his Upadeshamrita, Srila Rupa Goswami has described the symptoms of intimate relationships in this way. So I'm going to unpack this in a few seconds. Dadati pratigunati guyamakyati prichiti bhunkte bhojite chaiva sadvidam priti lakshanam. The words bhunkte bhojite indicate that one should eat with devotees, one should carefully avoid eating food offered by non-devotees. Indeed, a devotee should be very strict in not accepting food from a non-devotee, especially food prepared in restaurants or hotels or in airplanes. Wow. And I will be in an airplane tomorrow. Of course, I'll bring my own food. I'm not going to eat this stuff in an airplane. Srila Nityananda Prabhu's reference in this connection is meant to emphasize that one should avoid eating with Mayavadis and covert Mayavadis, like the Sahaja Vaishnavas who were materially affected. Covert means hidden Mayavadis. So, why is this? Well, it has a lot to do with the modes of nature. Like if you associate with people who are in the mode of passion, or ignorance, or even mixed goodness, it rubs off on you. It's like wet paint. It rubs off on you. And when it rubs off on you, your consciousness gets affected. It's a subtle law of nature. Just like if you listen to a certain type of music, you get passionate or ignorant, and you eat a certain type of food. But let's talk about eating right now. And food. Okay. Food is something that's put in the mouth. Because we do not have interchangeable senses like Krishna has. Okay. That's obvious. So when you put it in the mouth, according to the Ayurveda, this food, hopefully vegetarian, becomes eventually transformed into all the different parts of the body, the fat, the blood. And what's happening in the blood really affects the consciousness. And so, it's a subtle law of nature. If there's the mode of ignorance, of someone who's in the mode of ignorance and prepared food, then your consciousness will become more and more ignorant. And Prabhupada explained that dynamic is why Kripacharya, Dronacharya, grandfather Bhishma, and others' minds became affected because they were eating impure food in the palace. And of course, there was also Duryodhana's cook. They were probably eating with Duryodhana too. And because they were eating impure food, their minds became affected and they were fighting on the wrong side of the battle of Kurukshetra. It's pretty bad. In other words, they acted to support DEMONS. If you don't know what that is, look it up in your dictionary. In other words, they acted to support people who are not Krishna conscious because their minds had been affected. Whereas Uncle Vidura, he never ate with them. He ate very simply at home. He wasn't attracted to eating opulently, which is really interesting because his wife, it's described that Vidura's wife was a pure Vaishnavi, and she had pure consciousness, and she cooked very, 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 very simple. How do we know that? Because when Krishna came to try to make peace between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, what did he do? Well, first he tried to make peace. But secondly, he refused to take food from Duryodhana. He wouldn't sit down. I mean, that is like an insult when you go to someone's house and you say, I'm not going to take food with you. So Duryodhana was really offended. And secondly, he decided to eat at Vidura's house. Now, what did he get at Vidura's house? Porridge. Now, any of you know what porridge is? I mean, even I think about porridge, and it makes me remember my childhood days, my mother taking a little spoon and stuffing the porridge in my mouth. Even the word itself is just like, porridge. Usually like little kids eat porridge. Like oatmeal or something like that. I mean, oatmeal's all right. It's a little slimy. So if it's toasted, it's nice, the oats. But oatmeal. So Krishna decided to take porridge with Vidura. And he rejected the taking of super opulent preparations, maybe 100, 200 different preparations fried in ghee. Wow. And sweets. And all that. Krishna didn't take any of that. And Vidura never took any of that either. He just ate at home every day. So what can we learn from that? Protect your consciousness. Like Lord Caitanya said, a satsanga tyag, a Vaishnavachar. So, as Prabhupada said, with these loving exchanges, it's not that we don't have any exchange with people who are not Krishna conscious. We have a certain type of exchange, but as far as revealing the mind and other things that are more intimate, we have to be very careful about. And if we have people take association with us and take prasadam that is cooked with devotion and love, those people's consciousness will become changed and they will become devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it works in the opposite way too. All right? So next verse. E mata dvijane kare balabali vyazastuti kare dunhe yena gala gali. Thus they both went on talking and praising one another, although their praise appeared negative, for it appears as if they exchanged ill names. Tavi Prabhu Sarva Vaishnavera Namalana Mahaprasada Dena Maha Amrita Sinchiya. Thereafter, calling all the Vaishnavas, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu distributed Mahaprasadam as if sprinkling nectar. At that time, the mock fight between Advaitacharya and Nityananda Prabhu became more and more delicious. This is... You have to understand the Lord and his devotees enjoy all sorts of different rasas. And I guess there's a sarcastic rasa, which is humorous, even though sarcasm is not listed as one of the indirect rasas. So, Bhojana Kari Ute Sabe Haridwani Kare Haridwani Utila Saba Swarga Marcha Bari. After taking their lunch, all the Vaishnavas stood up and chanted the holy name of Hari, and the resounding noise filled all the upper and lower planetary systems. Tabi Mahaprabhu Saba Nija Bhakta Gane Sabhakari Srihaste Dila Malya Chandane. After this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu offered flower garlands and sandalwood pulp to all his devoted personal associates. Wow. Tabi Pariveshaka Sarupari Satajana Grihara Vitare Kaila Prasada Bhojana. The 7 persons headed by Swarup Damodar who were engaged in distributing prasadam to others then took their meals within the room. Prabhura Avashesha Govinda Rakila Dariya Seyana Harira Se Kichudila Dara. Govinda saved some remnants of food left by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and kept them carefully. Later, one portion of these remnants was delivered to Haridas Thakur. Bhaktagana Govinda Pasha Kichumagi Nila Se Prasadana Govinda Pani Paila. The remnants of food left by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were later distributed among devotees who begged for them, and finally Govinda personally took the last remnants. I would love to get those remnants. Swatantrishvara Prabhu Karinana Kela Daya Pakala Nama Koila Eka Lila. The fully independent Supreme Personality of Godhead performs various types of pastimes. The pastime of washing and cleansing the Gundicha temple is but one of them. Adadine Jagannatera Nitrotsava Nama Mahotsabhaila Bhaktera Prana Samana. The next day marked the performance of Netrotsava. This great festival was the life and soul of the devotees. Wow. After the bathing ceremony of Lord Jagannath during the fortnight before the Rath Yatra ceremony, the body of Lord Jagannath, having been washed, needs repainting. This is known as Anga Araga. The Netrotsava festival, performed gorgeously in the early morning of the Nava Yovana day, constitutes the life and soul of the devotees. Pakshadina Dukhi Loka Prabhura Darshanhe Darshana Kariya Loka Sukhapaila Mane. Everyone was unhappy for a fortnight because they could not see the deity of Lord Jagannath. Upon seeing the Lord at the festival, the devotees were very happy. Mahaprabhu Sukhe Lanasaba Bhakta Gana Jagannatha Darashane Karilagamana. On this occasion, greatly happy Lord, or Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu, took all the devotees with him and visited the Lord in the temple. Age Kashishvarayaya Loka Divarya Pachi Govindayaya Jala Karanga Lada. Kashishvara walked in front, checking the crowds of people, and Govinda walked in the rear, bringing the sannyasi's pitcher filled with water. The karanga is a kind of water pot especially carried by Mayavadi sannyasis, and generally carried by all other sannyasis. The reason for that water pot was so they could adhere to the principle of cleanliness. They could wash their hands before saying a mantra, do achman before saying a mantra, and of course if they had to relieve themselves, to cleanse themselves after that. Cleanliness was very, very important, and is very important. Prabhupada said cleanliness is next to godliness. Prabhupada ge purivarati dunhara gamana surupadvaita dunhara parshve dvijana. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went toward the temple, Paramananda Puri and Brahmananda Bharati walked in front of him, and at his two sides walked Surup Damodar and Advaita Charya. Pache Pachi Chaliyaya Aravakta Gana Utkantate Gela Saba Jagannatha Bhavana. With great eagerness, all the other devotees followed them into the temple of Lord Jagannath. Actually, last night I had a dream that I went into the Lord Jagannath's temple. And somehow or other I went, and actually it was an interesting dream. I was going into the temple, Lord Jagannath's temple, in the same physical form I have now, and I was thinking, don't they see that I'm not from India? And somehow they let me in. Anyway, nice dream. Darshana Lobete Kare Maryada Lagana Bhagavanape Yanakare Shrimukha Darshana. Out of great eagerness to see the Lord, they all neglected the regulative principles, and just to see the Lord's face went to the place where the food was offered. There are many regulative principles of deity worship. For example, one is not allowed to enter the room where food is offered to Lord Jagannath. But in this case, being very eager because of not having seen the Lord for 15 days, all the people overruled the regulative principles and entered the room. And that's out of ecstasy. It's not that you should do things like that normally. But if you're experiencing genuine ecstasy, then it's all right. Genuine ecstasy. Trisharta Prabhura Netra Brahmara Yugala Kara Trishnaya Pie Krishnara Vandana Kamala. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very thirsty to see the Lord, and his eyes became like two bumblebees, drinking the honey from the lotus-like eyes of Lord Jagannath, who is Krishna himself. Prapula Kamalajini Nayana Yugala Nilamani Darpana Kanti Ganda Chala Mala. The eyes of Lord Jagannath conquered the beauty of blossoming lotus flowers, and his neck was as lustrous as a mirror made of sapphires. Lord Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu usually saw Lord Jagannath from a distance, standing behind the column of Garuda. But because he had not seen Lord Jagannath for 15 days, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu felt great separation from him. In great eagerness, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu crossed the meeting hall and entered the room where food was offered just to see the face of Lord Jagannath. In verse 210, this action is called Maryada Langana, a violation of the regulated principles. This indicates that one should not come very near a superior. Both the Lord's deity form and the spiritual master should be seen from a distant place. This is called Maryada. In other words, that's the manners. Otherwise, as it is said, familiarity breeds contempt. Sometimes coming too near the deity or the spiritual master degrades the neophyte devotee. Personal servants of the deity and the spiritual master should therefore always be very careful, for negligence may overcome them in their duty. It's like Prabhupada described an example in this regard. He talked about the sun. That the sun, you know, the sun in the sky, can purify basically anything. However, if one is not careful, one can get burned by the sun. Some people even get cancer from the sun. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his eyes have been compared to thirsty bumblebees, and Sri Jagannath's eyes have been compared to blossoming lotus flowers. The author has made those comparisons in order to describe Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu while the Lord was deeply absorbed in ecstatic love for Lord Jagannath. Bandhu lira pulachini adara suranga ishara sitakanti amarta taranga. The chin of the Lord, tinged with buff color, conquered the beauty of the banduli flower. This increased the beauty of his mild smiling, which was like lustrous waves of nectar. Very, very poetic. Shimukha sundara kanti barik shane shane koti bhakta netra bringa kari madhu pane. The luster of his beautiful face increased at every moment, and the eyes of hundreds and thousands of devotees drank its honey like bumblebees. Yata pieta Krishna bari nirantara mukhambujakchari netra nayaya antara. As their eyes began to drink the nectarian honey of his lotus face, their thirst increased. Thus their eyes did not leave him. In the Lagu Bhagavatamrita 1.5, 538, Srila Rupa Goswami has described the beauty of the Lord in this way. Asamanordva maduya tarangamritavardihi jangamastavarolasi rupo gopendra nandanaha. The beauty of the son of Maharaj Nanda is incomparable. Nothing is higher than his beauty, and nothing can equal it. His beauty is like waves in an ocean of nectar. This beauty is attractive both for moving and non-moving objects. Similarly, in the Tantra Shastra, there's another description of the Lord's beauty. Kandarpakotya Buddha Rupa Shobha Niraja Padabja Nakang Chalasya Kutrapya Drishta Shruta Ramya Kanter Dhyanam Param Nanda Sutasya Vakshe. People have to learn not to call me during that time. This time. Wait a second. I have to shut this thing down. Alright, go back to the... Okay. I shall relate the supreme meditation upon Lord Sri Krishna, the son of Nanda Maharaj. The tips of the toes of his lotus feet reflect the beauty of the bodies of unlimited millions of Cupid, and his bodily luster has never been seen or heard of anywhere. One may also consult Shrimad Bhagavatam 10:29-14 in this connection. All right. Hey Mata Mahaprabhulana Bhaktya Ghana Madhyana Paryanta Kaila Shimukha Dharashana. Thus Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees enjoyed transcendental bliss upon seeing the face of Jagannath. This continued to midday. Sveta Kampa Shrudala Bahai Sarakshana Darshanera Lobe Prabhu Kare Sangvarana. As usual, there were transcendental blissful symptoms in Caitanya Mahaprabhu's body. He perspired and trembled, and a constant flow of tears fell from his eyes. But the Lord checked these tears so they would not disturb his seeing the face of the Lord. Madhya Madhya Bogalage Madhya Darashana Bhagera Samaye Prabhu Karena Kirtana. Their looking at the face of Lord Jagannath was interrupted only when he was offered food. Afterwards, they would again look upon his face when the food was being offered to the Lord. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu performed his kirtan. Darshananande Prabhu Sabha Bhasarila Bhaktagana Madhyana Karite Prabhuralana Gela. Feeling such great pleasure upon seeing the face of Lord Jagannath, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu forgot everything. The devotees, however, took him to his lunch at noontime. Pratakali Rata Yatra Habeka Janiya Sevagalagaya Boga Duiguna Kariya. Knowing that the car festival would be taking place in the morning, all the servants of Lord Jagannath were doubling their offerings of food. Gundicha Marjana Lila Sangshepe Kahila Yahadeki Shuni Papira Krishna Bhakti Oila. I have briefly described the pastimes of the Lord in washing and cleansing the Gundicha temple, as we mentioned before. Let me just get my pen out here. As we mentioned before, the cleansing of the Gundicha temple represents the cleansing of a devotee's heart, so that Krishna can reside in a devotee's heart, and a devotee's heart, and the Gundicha temple represents Vrindavan, so we want Krishna to reside peacefully. Shri Rupa Raghunatha, see I Krishnadas narrates Sri Caitanya Caritamrta following in their footsteps. Number 222. "13 is a lucky number. It is not an unlucky number, as some people think in the Western world. Connected? Uh-oh. How about now? Can everyone hear me now? Type in there if you can. Or type in there if you can't. Okay. Yeah, the internet sometimes goes up and down. It's one of those miseries of the material world. Miseries of the material world. It's breaking. Someone says much better. Someone says breaking. Who's right and who's wrong? Okay, the last two verses. Is it still cutting it out in large chunks right now? Yes, no. All right, sorry about that. I think we had a little thunderstorm here too. So I think the answer in the chat window. Can anyone hear me? Okay, we'll try once more. Now I'm on my alternate internet. We're going to try once more. Once more. Okay, can everyone hear me well now? It's on the alternate. Okay, good. Okay, so I'm just going to do the last two verses again in this chapter. Gundicha marjana lila sangshepi kahila yahadeki shuni papira krishna bhakti haila. I have briefly described the pastimes of the Lord in washing and cleansing the Gundicha temple. By seeing or hearing these pastimes, even sinful men can awaken their Krishna consciousness. Shri Rupa Raghunatha Pare Yara Asha Caitanya Charitamrta Kai Krishnadasi. Praying at the lotus feet of Shri Rupa and Shri Raghunatha, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishnadas, narrate Shri Caitanya Charitamrita, following in their footsteps. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to Shri Caitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 12, describing the washing and cleansing of the Gundicha temple. Okay, and we're going to go on to chapter 13. Let's go. Chapter 13 is the ecstatic dancing of the Lord at Ratha Yatra. Isn't that nice? We're all interested in the ecstatic dancing of the Lord. A summary of this chapter, so here's a chapter summary, is given by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Amrita Prabha Bhasha as follows. After bathing early in the morning, Sri Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhalu Vijaya. At that time, King Pratapha Rudra took a broom with a golden handle and began to cleanse the road. Lord Jagannath took permission from the goddess of fortune and then started in the car on a broad sandy beach, and on both sides of the road were residential quarters, houses, and gardens. Along that road, the servants called Gaudas began to pull the cars. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu divided a Sankirtan party into 7 divisions. two mridangas in each division. There were altogether 14 mridangas. While performing kirtan, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu exhibited various symptoms of transcendental ecstasy. And very blissfully. Number 13. When the cars reached the place known as Balagandhi, the devotees offered the deity simple food. At this time, in a nearby garden, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees took a brief rest from the dancing. Okay, that's the chapter summary. Can everybody hear me now? Type in if you can. Should be able. No? No. Well, maybe we should just take questions now since there's problems with the internet, so we don't miss anything in the Sri Caitanya Charitamrta. Let's see if it goes off or on. Okay, can everybody hear me now? Okay. So what we're going to do, since we're having problems with the internet, we're going to take questions now so we don't miss anything, because there's a thunderstorm going on, so we don't miss anything in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I'm going to stop sharing and allow you all to ask questions. And tomorrow we will hopefully have a better connection. Okay, I'll unmute you. Okay, so anyone has any questions, please raise your hand or unmute yourself or type something in the chat window. It's time to ask questions.
Please accept my humble obeisances.
Okay, Rakesh, so what's your question?
Does Jagannath Dham represent Mathura?
Is Jagannath what?
Like when they say Lord went to Gundicha temple, Gundicha represents Vrindavan.
Vrindavan, yeah.
So like here,
Jagannath temple, right? The Jagannath temple in Puri represents Dwarka,
okay.
not Mathura. Because Dwarka is where Krishna is there with his wives, with the goddess of fortune. And then from Dwarka, he goes to Vrindavan. Okay? Okay. Who else has a question they'd like to ask? Please type your question or speak your question, or we can end class early. Type, speak, or unmute yourself. All right, you got a few seconds. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama. Oh, here. So here it is. Atmanandini is asking, she says, devotees are taking risk of eating at non-devotees' places during preaching. How are they protected? If someone is doing something for preaching Krishna consciousness, then Krishna will protect you. But the motivation has to be for preaching Krishna consciousness rather than for There's another question that's kind of funny. Rather than for one sense gratification. In other words, if you're preaching, then you're given special protection. Okay. Next question. My question is offering brown rice to Lord Jagannath. Yes, Lord Jagannath can eat brown rice. One point, Prabhupada had said something negative about brown rice when it was presented to him that the brown rice that they were offering to the deities was par-boiled, it was cooked first. So we shouldn't offer anything to Lord Jagannath that is cooked first. We should be cooking it from the raw state. So that's why Prabhupada objected to that, but there's nothing wrong with brown rice. Brown rice is a natural rice. And of course the highest class rice to offer to the deities is like a basmati rice. But brown rice is okay. Lord Jagannath likes brown rice. All right, when is it nice to go to Jagannath Puri? Anytime. Anytime you can go to Jagannath Puri. It's always nice.
Hare Krishna, Gurudev. There
Yeah.
is also the basmati brown rice. So that is all right, isn't it? It's a high quality
Yes.
basmati brown rice, which is
Basmati,
organic as well.
basmati brown rice or regular brown rice or wild rice. You could offer all those to Lord Jagannath. Whatever Lord Jagannath likes, you offer to him. You can offer pizza to Lord Jagannath. You could offer ice cream to Lord Jagannath.
Thank you,
You,
Gurudev.
you could offer bagels to Lord Jagannath if you like. As long as it's vegetarian and love and devotion. Krishna says, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yomi bhakta prayachati. Offer to Krishna something with love and devotion, as long as it's within the group of foodstuffs that Krishna normally eats.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, but oftentimes we are not offering the products with the yeast to the deities, right? Like we are making pizza, bread, and yeast with the yeast.
That's an interesting question about yeast. Actually, let me give you a little feedback on that. On yeast, there are many preparations where they use yeast. They're bona fide preparations. You ever heard of jalebis?
Yes, Maharaj.
So, a natural jalebi, not the kind you get not the kind of a premix. A natural jalebi is using yeast, and it picks up the yeast from the air. I don't know if you knew that.
Right. It's self-fermented.
It's fermented, but
Yeah.
why does it ferment? Why does it ferment?
So that's because of the yeast. It automatically gets it.
It's because of the yeast. It picks up yeast from the air. And so you have a jalebi, and what else? There are other preparations that pick up yeast from
Dosa
the
is
air.
also there, Maharaj. One of the preparation which has self-generated yeast, like
And what other type? There's another one. Idli.
idli. Yeah.
So idli uses yeast. Dosha uses yeast. And I think there's some other Vedic preparations that use yeast. Although they're picking it from the air, I think it's less risky. No, yogurt is not from yeast. Yogurt is a culture, something different. I think it's less risky to purchase a type of yeast that you know. And I remember many times eating pizza with Bhakti Chu Maharaj, and they put yeast in the crust.
Yeah.
You know, and he definitely had yeast in the crust. We used to eat pizza together, and it was definitely a yeast type of preparation. So my personal feeling is, and this is just my personal understanding, that if you can use yeast from the air, there's wild yeast growing in the air, then why couldn't you have some like yeast that you would know what type of yeast it is? Because there are types of poisonous yeast in the air. Sometimes if you allow something to ferment and it gets the wrong type of yeast, then it actually can be dangerous. Where did the yeast issue come from? I don't know. All I know is that some Gopal's asking that question is that some Vedic preparations actually use yeast, like Italy and other preparations like that. And jalebis certainly use yeast. Nowadays, of course, if you get the premix for jalebis, it doesn't use yeast, it uses baking powder, which is actually last class to do that. But to let
Okay.
it ferment, fermentation is always from yeast. So I remember going to one temple once where they say, well, we don't make yeast bread, we make sourdough bread. And they said sourdough bread is all right, but sourdough is from yeast.
Right? It's like naturally it gets, fermented and develops the yeast in it. So,
That's right. So natural yeast, but the yeast you buy in the store is also natural yeast. The wheat you buy in the store is also hopefully natural wheat. And if you take yeast from the air, you're taking your chances as to what type of yeast. There are dangerous yeasts in the air. Just like if you've ever walked in the forest, you'll see different mushrooms. And some of them are highly poisonous, and some of them are intoxicating mushrooms. And all those yeasts for the mushrooms are actually floating in the air. So my feeling is in order to be consistent, if you're going to say there's no yeast, then don't make idlis and don't make any of these other preparations that use yeast. Anyway, that's my own personal opinion. Someone else may have a different opinion. It's not an absolute opinion. It's just applying logic and reasoning to the yeast issue.
thank you, Maharaj.
Because
That
because
helps.
I mean the yeast that you sell in the store is natural yeast too. They just actually take the proper yeast from the air and they cultivate it.
That's true.
At least you know what type of yeast you're getting, rather than the poisonous yeast. There are many poisonous yeasts in the air. Okay, here's a question: is it okay to ask, why do you have a wound in your arm? I shouldn't have put it up there. The reason I have the wound in my hand is that I was at a preaching program the other day and I got too enthusiastic. I was playing the guitar and I got really enthusiastic and I kept rubbing my arm on the guitar. I was playing so enthusiastically. Devotees got me. It's the devotees' fault. They got me too ecstatic. And I just kept doing it. I didn't even notice I had a material body. I was so happy. And then next thing I looked down, there was a little, it's called an abrasion burn. It's a normal thing. It's not something bad. It's just, it'll get better. So from now on, I have to be careful when I become ecstatic because, if I become too ecstatic, I may do anything. So I have to control my ecstasy. That's what happens. It's not that I had a fight. It's not that, anyway, it's not that I had a fight with anyone. It's just something that happens when you become ecstatic in Krishna consciousness.
Gurudev,
Yeah.
regarding the yeast issue, in India, they don't take turmeric during Ekadasi because it's usually contaminated
Yeah.
with rice flour or wheat flour. So could it be that in India, those yeasts that they sell are perhaps contaminated with something? They have bad reputation because they've been found to be contaminated?
That's possible. I mean, I have turmeric here that is actually ground locally, so it doesn't have any rice flour. So I use it on the Kaddishi.
Yeah, I mean, the
Who
export
knows?
itself.
Who knows the reason for it? I mean, in Jagannath Puri, they don't offer any root vegetables either to the deities. They don't offer tomatoes. I mean, in different places you'll find different restrictions, and I'm not criticizing any of those restrictions or for whatever reason. But if you look at something logically, I like to apply logic and reason to my Krishna consciousness. you'll see that if you can use yeast in one preparation, why shouldn't you use yeast in another preparation? But if someone has that rule, follow the rule. I'm not going to interfere with someone's cultural training. We respect that. We use whole raw turmeric on Ekadasis. That's very good. Okay, I wouldn't worry about these things. Don't worry, be happy. Just chant Hare Krishna. I mean, I don't use yeast anyway. I just eat basically boiled vegetables. So if you eat like me, it's almost Ekadasi every day. But you cannot imitate that. Okay, I think we should end now. I think the internet's working well now that everybody was interested in yeast and what we could eat and what we can't eat. I think there was much more attentiveness during this part of the conversation than when we were reading the Caitanya Caritamrta. That's funny. Okay, we'll see everybody same time, same station. I'll be somewhere else, but we'll have the class from wherever I am tomorrow. All glories to His divine grace, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada.